call the subcommittee back to order. We are pleased today to welcome the Librarian of Congress, Dr. Carla Hayden, and the Acting Deputy Librarian, Mark Sweeney, here today, as well as your entire team. Hopefully someone's checking out books over there still or watching the library. But I know you've got a great group of folks here that are experts in different areas, and if we need to, they're available, I know, to make comments or testify as well. Dr. Hayden, the Library of Congress's adjusted fiscal year 2019 request that you've made is $706 million, an increase of $36.2 million above currently enacted levels. This requested increase would go towards mandatory pay and price level increases, information technology system enhancements, increased staffing to enhance the library's bandwidth in the areas of collection management, analytical capacity at CRS, and reducing the recording backlog at the Copyright Office, as well as continued funding for the Visitor Experience project at the Thomas Jefferson Building. The Copyright Office request is $93.4 million, and the subcommittee continues to believe that the modernization of the Copyright Office is a very important initiative. The Congressional Research Service request is $125.6 million, and we thank the CRS for its work in ensuring that all non-confidential CRS reports will soon become available to the public, and ask CRS to keep the committee informed on the progress leading up to the implementation of this new procedure. And finally, the Books for the Blind and Physically Handicapped request is $52.7 million, and relocating the NLS's headquarters to a location in closer proximity to the Capitol campus continues to be a priority of this committee, and we are working to make that relocation a reality. So again, Dr. Hayden, welcome to the committee, and at this point, I'm going to yield to my good friend from Ohio, Mr. Ryan, for his opening statements as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it. Library of Congress is one of my favorite institutions on Capitol Hill. I love the buildings. I'm repeatedly impressed by what they have hidden in the stacks in climate-controlled storage rooms. If James Madison, John Adams, and Thomas Jefferson could see today what their creation has evolved into, I think that they would be extremely pleased with themselves. And in fact, yesterday was the 217th anniversary of the library's creation, which I know you know, because you know everything about the library. Walking through the halls of the library and viewing their collection and artifacts is something everyone visiting Washington, D.C. should add to their list, and I encourage all of our groups to at least get over there and take a look. And I'm looking forward to learning more today about the plans to enhance the visitor experience at the Thomas Jefferson Building. I expect our subcommittee will provide support to help bring Dr. Hayden's vision for the library's future into being. The library is also someplace we can turn when we want to talk to an expert on some area of policy coming up in Congress. In last year's legislation, the subcommittee worked to make CRS reports more accessible to the public. These documents are invaluable to members and congressional staff, and I'm pleased to see CRS's budget request prioritizes an increase in staff to expand research capacity in many policy areas. I'm also glad to see that the library's budget request prioritizes IT modernization, because information technology ties in with everything the library does. Upgrading the library system will help serve Congress's research needs, serve the needs of copyright holders, and make it easier for people across the country to access the library's materials remotely. So thank you all for coming in today. I look forward to hearing what Dr. Hayden and her colleagues have to say. I yield back my time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Dr. Hayden, your statement and written testimony will be made part of the record, as well as statements of the Acting Register of Copyrights and the Director of Congressional Research Service, and so we'd be pleased to allow you to summarize your statement and address the committee at this time. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Chairman Yoder and Ranking Member Ryan and members of the subcommittee. And I appreciate the opportunity to give testimony in support of the library's fiscal 2019 budget. As you know, the library remains the largest library in the world, a research institution, and of course, a destination for scholars and members of Congress. It also holds enormous potential for reaching many, many more Americans in all walks of life. And this has been and will be a major focus of my tenure. And over the past year, we made great strides in increasing access to the library and improving the user experience. For example, the U.S. Copyright Office published a new archive of copyright cases. The Congressional Research Service is currently testing online webinars and added instant messaging. The National Library Service for the Blind and Physically Handicapped launched a public awareness campaign to reach seniors and others challenged. and the law library put fully indexed and searchable historic versions of the U.S. codes online, and then new primary source collections online include the papers of Alexander Hamilton, Ulysses Grant, Benjamin Franklin, and Susan B. Anthony, as well as high-resolution scans of the original documents in the Abraham Lincoln papers. I've visited libraries and communities this past year in many congressional districts, and I've been energized by the interest and enthusiasm and expressed need for greater connection to the resources and services of the library. And realizing the library has the potential to reach out across the country means that we have to take care of fundamentals first. And I'd like to express my gratitude for your support in the 2 previous fiscal years for mission-critical work. And that has helped with our modernization of our information technology and Congress's service that we are very proud of. Special thanks for your support for initiative to revitalize and enhance the visitor experience in the Thomas Jefferson Building through a public-private partnership. And also deeply appreciative, and the Acting Deputy Librarian Mark Sweeney joins me in this, for the storage modules at Fort Meade that are part of the architect of the Capitol's budget. And I'm happy to report, as we look at the support of this committee in the crucial areas of IT modernization, Copyright Office staff, and storage programs, the library has closed and is awaiting confirmation from GAO on 24 of the 31 public recommendations for improving IT efficiencies. The Copyright Office has reduced its registration backlog by 25%, and we are actively filling the interim storage units at Cabin Branch, as well as the recently completed Module 5 at Fort Meade. And in addition, I've taken significant managerial steps to make sure that we have efficiencies in our operations. I've appointed Mark Sweeney as the Acting Deputy Librarian of Congress. All information technology organizations and personnel were centralized, and we completed the first year of the strategic planning process, envisioning 2025. Part of that process determined with research that the library needs to be more user-centered, and we will have, of course, Congress as the library's foremost user. As a result of this planning, I realigned internal units to prepare for that move forward. And I'm confident that these steps will give us a robust management structure to move forward. Now, the fiscal 2019 budget request builds on the past 2 years and concentrates on information technology modernization, targeted workforce skills, and increased access. And the details are provided in my written testimony, and the highlights include ongoing investment in copyright information technology modernization as we move to the development of a new generation of the registration system and a modern recordation system, which is, many people might not realize, is currently paper-based and manual. We will have an investment in our CRS service with more analysts, economists, and attorneys, and also full restoration of copyright examiner workforce and additional foreign legal and language expertise for the law library. And finally, workforce investment in library services that will speed up the processing of significant collections, a backlog that includes collections such as Theodore Roosevelt and Caspar Weinberger that are waiting to be processed. So to reiterate, IT modernization, a strong workforce, helps the library meet its goal of increased access and better service. So Chairman Yoder, Ranking Member Ryan, members of the subcommittee, we are the embodiment of the American ideal of a knowledge-based democracy, and we thank you for your support. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. You spoke to the committee about the visitor's experience.
Yes.
I thought maybe we could dive into that a little bit. This is a new project at the Thomas Jefferson Building. It's a public-private partnership that has the potential to changed and revolutionized the experience for visitors at the library. And as bless you, as you know, you stated, I think, well, that you're the largest library in the world, and Mr. Ryan makes the case that the founders would be, astounded to see how far we've taken it. Yet, one of the concerns you've laid forward is that maybe we're not fully grasping the potential for the public to be engaged with the experience the library has to offer. Can you talk to the committee about why this project's important and how it'll enhance and benefit the experience of those coming to Washington, D.C.?
Congress invested a significant amount of funding in the 90s to renovate and bring out all of the architectural beauty of the Thomas Jefferson Building. It was a magnificent project. The main reading room was closed for 5 years, and now 1.8 million visitors physically come into the Jefferson Building, and they all say this is the most beautiful building. Some people agree in Washington, but
that's what I tell everybody.
it is. And however, they leave without getting the experience of connecting to the collections, those magnificent collections that the library has, and also without an understanding that this is their library as well, and to get a chance to have that and be inspired, we hope, like so many other people have. And so the project has 3 parts: to make sure that the library has a permanent exhibition space to exhibit the treasures, from the Gutenberg Bible to the contents of Abraham Lincoln's pockets the night he was assassinated, to the original draft of the Declaration of Independence in Thomas Jefferson's hand with footnotes by Benjamin Franklin and John Adams, and a rotating collection that will showcase all of the things that the library has: film, sound recording, all of these things. So that will be a major part, a treasures gallery as we're calling it. Also, people walk into the wonderful Great Hall, they're fascinated by the beauty, and then they are not able to go into the magnificent reading room. And that will be the second part, to open up the reading room with acoustical protections for any researchers that might be in the room, and to get the idea across about Thomas Jefferson's library. So we're hoping we'll be able to relocate Thomas Jefferson's original library, 6,000 volumes, in that space in the reading room, and tell the story of the library. And a part that is very exciting for a former children's librarian is to have an actual youth center, hands-on history, to engage young people, and we're talking very young all the way up to teenagers, in working with primary sources to see Alexander Hamilton's last letter to his wife. They're engaged with the play. This is the time for them to actually see that, to test paper, to find out how you preserve documents, and also think about making history themselves. So those 3 areas would be the major focus. And then, of course, enhancing the gift shop, and also having some cafe type of experience as well, so people can linger. So we're very excited about this opportunity.
Well, I think it's a wonderful vision, and really connects the public in a way that, as you laid out, haven't been connected in the past, and makes the library a much more tangible, usable asset. What are your estimates on the timeline, the cost? How many visitors do you expect you might see? How many do we get now? And sort of how do you see the numbers?
I mentioned the 1.8 million, and we're working very closely with the architect of the Capitol. Mr. Ayers his staff has been very involved as we've developed this, and we know that we will be working with them on the impact of additional visitors and flow and egress and things like that. So that's part of a master plan that should be, and I have the estimated timeline, that should be about 6 months. And that's the master plan for everything. $2 million is the estimate for that, and I think that's in the appropriated proposed language as well. And then the actual master plan will be available in June of 2019.
Would the project be completed?
Everything, and this will include fundraising, private public partnership that I mentioned. So that will be going on as well. The entire project should be finished by May, June of 2020. And that would include the Treasures Gallery, the Reading Room, and the Youth Center. And we also think that 2020 is a wonderful
Great vision.
timeline.
Right. All right. Thank you. Mr. Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just got motivated to get reelected a couple more times to make sure I'm here for all that. One of the issues with the upcoming fiscal year 19 bill, other than the visitor experience, the bill proposes to give your salaries and expenses account a $6.8 million increase over last year, but $6.2 million less than the request. Can you share with us what that means for you and your operation?
And I want to rephrase to make sure that I answer correctly in terms of the impact of getting less. Is that?
Yeah.
That would probably necessitate a hiring freeze. And we hope that we would not have to have any furloughs in that way, and also reducing some programmatic aspects as well. But a hiring freeze would be.
And have you evaluated what programs would be reduced or eliminated?
We have thought about it. And in terms of actual programming, we wouldn't want things that affect the core mission. That's the preservation, conservation, basic reference work, CRS, and copyright. So those mission critical things we would definitely look at.
Okay. In the interest of making sure all of our colleagues have an opportunity, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back.
Mr. Amade.
In the same interest as the ranking member, I yield back.
Ms. Wasserman Schultz.
Thank you.
You have 15 minutes of questions you can have.
I'll only, take 3 or 4 hours, no problem. I wanted to just ask you about the potential improvements and expansion of the Young Readers Room. Is that part of the
Yes,
vision
the visitor
of
experience. And we want to thank you also. I know that you have been involved. The idea of having a place
Thank Jake and Rebecca
for
Schultz.
young people to get inspired. I recently received a letter from an 8-year-old, Adam Coffey from San Clemente, California, who expressed a little disappointment that there wasn't a young reader's card and definitely spaces for young people. And we know that there's an opportunity with the lack of significant investment now in civics.
So he was not impressed with the
He was
with what's
impressed.
there
We
now?
invited him in. He's going to be the first recipient of the new reader's
Oh,
card with his approval. So we're looking at that, but there is a need to supplement civics education throughout the country. When I have traveled, that's something that I'm hearing, that people want to be able to encourage young people to get involved in history, make history themselves. So that focus on the Youth Center will have several areas based on age groups. And teaching with, and also an area for teachers. We have teaching with primary resources, so we'll be able to supplement that as well. So it's very exciting, and when I mention it to people throughout the country, they're very excited about having screens that will allow young people to interact with curators and with preservation and conservation specialists in the Madison building.
Oh, wow.
So they'll be able to talk to a conservator who's working on something and then preserve some paper themselves, invisible ink.
really
We're
cool.
trying all the things that will get them involved.
So not to bore you, Mr. Chairman, but 14 years ago, when I first came to Congress, twin 5-year-old little boy and girl, who I gave birth to, wanted to do nothing more than to go across the street to the Library of Congress and check out a book, which was not possible. And there were no children's books at all in the Jefferson Building. I went to the stacks and found an annotated research fairy tale book, Aesop's fairy tales, and that didn't quite cut it for my 5-year-olds. And fast forward a few years later, and when I had a chance to talk to your predecessor, Dr. Billington, and now you're expanding on that dream, the Young Readers Room was created, and Jake, Rebecca, and Shelby Schultz were the ribbon cutters for the opening of it, and those that little boy and girl just finished their freshman year of college. So
Right. That's it. That's
so
it.
time flies, and thank you. It's really, I
Right.
share the feelings of my colleagues of how much love we all have for the library, and thank you and your colleagues for the incredible Library of Congress dinners that I know are underwritten, but also that require Herculean effort on the part of your staff to put on, and they are not only educational, but one of the few opportunities that I think we all have to sit and break bread together in a bipartisan way and learn something and get to know one another. So thank you very, very much. And now I have an actual, real, substantive question on electronic media. So you published, actually I have 2 questions, and then I'll be quiet. You published a notice of proposed rulemaking that you would begin publishing ebooks under your mandatory deposit rule on a request basis. And that's a long overdue step. I think it's phenomenal that you've moved in that direction. So because you have authors and publishers now that create electronic-only books and self-publish. And so my question is a couple parts. How, as members of Congress, can we help support the library with the resources necessary to carry out that increased responsibility? And do you see the library making an affirmative commitment in terms of making this a requirement in the future, like it currently is for printed publications?
As Librarian of Congress, I'm responsible for the administration of the copyright process and the efficiency, and IT modernization, of course, is going to be a major part of any future digital aspects of copyright deposit. And we're very pleased that Karen Temple, who is the acting register, is involved with the policy, of course, and she's here to be able to address the rulemaking directly.
Good morning, or good afternoon, thank you. In terms of the rulemaking, yes, we did issue a rulemaking on behalf of the library to begin potentially the collection of ebooks. That rulemaking will be open until the end of May, where we'll receive comments from various stakeholders about how that actually should take place. And once we've received those comments, we'll be able to draft a final rule, which will allow the library for the first time to be able to collect through mandatory deposit electronic-only books. So that's something that I know that the library is really supportive of, given their interest in providing for access to digital materials.
Do you think you'll expand that to audiobooks and podcasts as well?
So in
eventually?
In 2016, we did issue a notice of inquiry at the library's behalf, asking about whether we should expand to both ebooks and sound recordings. We determined at this time, or the library has determined at this time, to restrict the current rulemaking just to ebooks and not to expand to sound recordings. I don't think that they would consider expanding to sound recordings until after we get comments from stakeholders about the ebooks, and then determine whether we have even the capacity to be able to accept ebooks and sound recordings. And then subsequently, I think that there will be at some point a sound recording in PRM, but that's not something that will probably happen in the near future.
Mr. Chairman, I have 2 more questions. Do you want me to ask them now, or? Okay.
And Mr. Sweeney also worked closely with Ms. Temple on that
Fantastic.
in terms of
Thank you.
from the library
Good to see
side.
the cooperation. My other question, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is on the CRS workforce. It's decreased by approximately 13% in the last 8 years.
Yes.
You've lost 92 FTEs, and 23% of CRS staff will be eligible for retirement this year. We need to let that sink in for a moment. Given that CRS processes over 60,000 requests for custom research, and that almost a quarter of CRS staff will be eligible for retirement this year, what steps are you taking to retain current subject matter experts and to recruit new qualified experts, and how can we support your efforts?
This fiscal year's request is for 20 additional FTEs, and those will be more senior analysts, economists, lawyers, who will give more depth to the CRS services. That's in addition to the 8 that were put on last year. There's an active mentoring program that's going on right now, and they're very aware of the need for knowledge management. And in fact, IT modernization is helping in terms of the capturing of information and knowledge. It's an information knowledge system that CRS is working on as well, so that when that 27% that are eligible for retirement right now,
That's more than I thought.
that's concerning, because some of that experience is very difficult to transfer. But the technology, and what CRS is working on in terms of technology, is to have an information management program that people can basically transfer some of the things that they are expert in, and working on digitizing the files. A lot of the analysts have
But
files that go back.
You're not talking about shifting to not having a
Oh,
person
no.
who's a subject matter expert? Okay.
The strength of CRS is having that 24/7 access to a person.
Right.
CRS is also looking, I mentioned about the instant messaging, texting, other ways to make sure, Skyping, and really using technology so that they are available in different ways. So the people are still the essence of it, though.
Thank you. And my last question is, we don't really have too many contentious issues in Ledge Branch, but we did have one a couple of years ago with the card catalog and the renaming of one of the catalog categories related to how we refer to immigrants,
Right.
or how we refer to what was at one point known as illegal aliens. And the library had proposed modernizing the terminology, and there was an issue in this subcommittee that, let's say, slowed that process down. So where are we with that in the library?
The library has proposed additional subject headings for that particular term. And over 5,000 of these types of updating actions take place a year.
Right.
With the library. There are all types of things. I was part of one in terms of African Americans, Black, Negro, so I know that in the 70s.
Yeah.
So what the library has proposed terms that will not conflict with the U.S. Code. That was another concern. Unauthorized immigration is what is proposed.
Okay.
The other terms, and this is with all the other terms that have been updated, I think that's the easiest without getting too librarianish, updated, because this is cataloging, subject headings, things like that, will still be available. So if you type in a term that has been updated, you will be referred possibly to another term, but this is a way that the library uses. And the Library of Congress cataloging is for all libraries, and look to our cataloging. So right now, we're paused waiting on direction, but that's the proposal.
So, Mr. Chairman, I don't know if you were on the subcommittee when we dealt with this, but the library over the years has phased out terms that are offensive or that fall out of use or are ultimately deemed no longer appropriate for modern communication. And that term was one of those, which again was along with thousands of updates that they propose. And so as we move forward with this bill, if we could discuss possibly ensuring that we don't interfere with the library's ability to be the professionals that they are, and use their judgment as to what the appropriate search terms are for, and it may be that they decide to keep it since it's part of the code and some people search that way. But that was not their original proposal, and so giving them the freedom that they should have, particularly under the First Amendment, I think is something that we need to not be obstacles to. And I yield back.
And Mark, I don't know if you want to, but in terms of the library catalog, the terms are not taken out of the catalog. It's just, if you think about and I won't mention a major search engine, but when you type in a term, what comes up first?
Right.
Or something like
Yeah.
that. So it's adding additional terminology to the catalog. Is that a fair
We continue to
assessment?
maintain, cross-references so people can discover works, regardless of the terminology that they use. We never alter titles or anything like that, or the text of an actual work. So, and we've done, we did an extensive survey of opinions around the proposed unauthorized immigration as well as non-citizens, and take into full consideration the terminology used in the U.S. Code, try to make it as consistent as possible.
Thank you.
Mr. Newhouse.
Welcome, Librarian Hayden. Pleasure to have you here, and thank you for bringing all your people here, Mr. Sweeney. I'm not sure how far, all the way around the room, I guess, right? But welcome, and thank you for taking the time. I do want to thank you for playing host to the dinners, the congressional dinners. Those are very worthwhile, and not only a good way to get us together in a bipartisan way, but to see the beautiful venue that you call your workspace. And I honestly do, every chance I get, tell visitors that come to the Capitol that they need to go see the Library of Congress. It is the most beautiful building in Washington, D.C. So you mentioned that you got, I think, 93 million visitors to your website last year.
Yes.
Which is amazing. And that new collections are coming online all the time. So I guess my question, what percentage of the library's collection is accessible? And so what kind of utilization do you foresee in the future with the resources that you're getting to accomplish that?
I'm going to let Mark.
I would say that, all the collections of the Library of Congress are accessible in one way or another.
Online?
Not online necessarily. The exception, of course, would be the unprocessed collections that we have, which is estimated about 28 million items. And an item that can be counted as a book could be an individual item, or an individual sheet of paper in a manuscript collection is an item.
And what is unprocessed?
Unprocessed means that the material has been received by the library, but it hasn't been organized, and we don't have an entry, either a finding aid or a catalog record that people can use to identify what part of the collection they want. So unfortunately, that means we're not able to serve the collection in the way that we would ideally want it to be. Of course, on the spectrum of accessibility, at the highest level, of course, is the item is digitized and is accessible 24/7 online. In order for that to happen, we need to, the work has to be in a rights status that permits us to make it accessible like that. So, we have a very large collection, but a very, very high percentage of it is material that is not in the public domain yet, or is rights restricted in one way or another. An example would be that someone may have provided their papers, their manuscripts to the library, but it may be under an embargo for a period of time. So we have a lot of work to do. There's a lot in the collection that we can digitize and make accessible, but we tend to focus on items that are unique. They're titles that are works that are only held by the Library of Congress or not widely held, so that we don't duplicate what other libraries might be able to do. And then those items that have little or no restriction on their use, so that we can make them as broadly accessible as possible.
And this year's fiscal request has 40 FTEs to double the rate of the processing of those special collections. And I like to say, I mentioned Theodore Roosevelt and Susan B. Anthony and all of these. Just imagine all of these people behind us waiting. Their papers are there waiting to be put into a format that will allow you to not only look at them, but find them online. That's what the
So
process
is it realistic to believe that at some point all the collection will be online?
We recently had an Inspector
accessible.
General report that says that there's an history never stops.
Yeah, right.
So there's always going to be, and for the next 50 to 100 years, they estimate that you will still be receiving things in paper format from historical significant people and organizations like the NAACP, which is the largest archive, but it's not digitized. The 15 to 20% of things that are waiting to be processed will probably be the average. What this request is to get us to that point, because we'll always be in the near future, 50 to 100 years, getting in those types of things waiting to be processed. We're working on work-study programs, internships, citizen historian project that will allow people from the public to help us in terms of this, but really to have dedicated staff to get that out.
Just one more question, if I could, Mr. Chairman, about the Congressional Research Service. Has proven to be an invaluable asset that I think most all of us use. And Ms. Wasserman Schultz recited some numbers that are very concerning
Yes.
In staff changes, and not that people can't retire, but we have to be able to continue. Has the number of requests for information increased over the last couple of years? And what is the average turnaround time for offices that make requests to receive the requested?
You mentioned that our staff members are here, and the head of CRS, Ms. Mazanek, is here, and I let her
And then I
address
would
that
ask also,
directly.
any changes that you, how do you expect that that will change when you add employees? I'm trying to get, is it going to improve the timeliness if you can add more personnel? Thank you. Mary.
Thank you for your
Good to see
question.
you.
Good to see you.
Green.
Okay. The number of requests is pretty consistent, but the requests are all over the board, from purely informational requests that are a very quick answer to more in-depth analytical requests. So I can't even begin to figure out or calculate the average time it takes to respond.
Because it's all over the board.
It's all over the board. I think in recent years, as our staff numbers have come down, the analysts have worked with congressional staff to try to scope the request to be able to do what needs to be done in the time frame that we're given. If we're given more time, we can produce a more highly analytical product. Then your other question was about additional staff or?
Well, how that would impact that turnaround time, I guess.
I think what we're trying to do, or what I'm trying to do, is bring on staff so that the senior analysts and attorneys have more time to focus on the analytical work, the highly analytical, sophisticated work that at least they don't feel they have enough time to do because they're answering a lot of requests. So some of the folks we're bringing on board, especially in last year's appropriation, the FY 2018, were more junior folks, 3 to 5 year NTEs that would come in and hopefully unload the senior analysts so that they can do the more highly analytical work for Congress.
It's like a SWAT
Yeah,
team,
okay.
and so triage, and so you have the junior level fielding the basic types of
Correct.
question, and then the others coming in on that.
Good, good. Well, I appreciate that. And since freshman orientation, before I even knew what CRS stood for, you guys were right there being very helpful, and so I want to
Thank you.
express appreciation for that, too.
You're so kind. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
While we're on the subject of CRS, if you want to, Mary, if you wanted to stay at the table.
And Chairman, I must say, on a recent visit to CRS, I noted an exceptionally large number of coffee machines. All right?
Some late nights over there, or what?
They are something,
A lot of caffeine.
lot of energy.
We'll keep it. We'll keep sending it over. I just wanted to ask a little bit of a follow-up on the making the CRS reports public and that process and what that'll eventually look like to the public, what the timeline is. If you could just update on the committee on your work since that measure
Sure.
has passed and how you see it progressing.
Sure, we hopped on it right away. We're working on it very aggressively. We have a working group that consists of CRS analysts and folks, and also staff from Bob Barton's office, OCIO, to do the technology piece. So we will be able to meet the statutory deadlines. It appears that the most feasible option, although I don't want to lock down into any definite plan at this point, we will get the plan to you as scheduled, is to use the congress.gov website as the portal to go into, and then have something on the website that would take you to another page for the CRS reports. We're starting with our classic R-Series reports, the classic analytical reports. And as this evolves, we will be adding the additional products. Did I answer your question?
So what's the? I'm trying to remember what the statutory timeline was.
So we have to have a plan in 60 days.
Okay.
And then after that, we have, basically the drop dead date is in September, and I forget the.
To have it
exact
up and running.
To have it up and running.
Okay.
And I just have to say that this subcommittee's investment, Congress's investment in IT is allowing us, the last 2 years are allowing us to be much more capable of responding in a more timely fashion because everything is being centralized and
Right.
internal. So Mr. Barton is here, and I want to just give him credit for helping
Okay.
us.
Thank you. On the NLS e-reader program, in 2006, Congress authorized the NLS to provide e-readers for electronic braille. Since that time, NLS has been working on a pilot program to determine the specific type of e-reader technology it would be best to invest in. Could you update the committee on that pilot program and when NLS might be in a position to make a recommendation on the specific type of technology that Congress should invest in?
And Ms. Kessinger is not here today, she was ill, but the experiment with the Perkins School, about 200 e-readers, is yielding very good information about that, and we're tracking the usage of the new e-readers, and it's anticipated that in the third quarter of fiscal year 2018, the NLS will purchase about 2,000 Braille e-readers that will be distributed to 8 of the network libraries. There are about 100 network libraries, so this will be the next phase. And from the early feedback, the response has been very good, and we are very excited about this opportunity to make more e-readers available.
And when do you think the request will come to Congress to expand and to invest in the actual program?
I'll have to get
Okay.
back to you on that one in terms of the actual request that will be in. There are parts of the program and the testing in terms of working with different technology vendors
Mm-hmm.
in terms of producing the e-readers that'll be used. So we know the features that we want, but we'll also have to make sure that we have a vendor that can produce the quantity, about 30,000 e-readers. So that's a part that we'll be looking at. So we'll come
Okay.
back to you on that.
All right, and then lastly, just back to the Copyright Office.
Yes.
We're investing in technology. Both last year and next year, we'll be in next year's bill, we'll be adding additional resources for technology based upon your request. We really want the Copyright Office to be successful and be efficient. And of course, we've had public testimony in front of this committee in the past couple of years regarding from outside organizations discussing how Patent and Trademark Office can, turn around in 48 hours, and it takes the Copyright Office 6 to 9 months, and there's delays. And one of the things you said is they're different things, but also you need technology. We need to invest in if we want to improve it. Can you just give us a quick highlight of what you think the improvements will be and how they'll actually affect the artists. Because we also hear from a lot of the artists who have frustrations as well, and they're counting on us to, make
Yes.
reforms, and they're even asking us to do reforms maybe that even the library doesn't agree with. So I want to know how you see this going in a way that we can assure the artists and those using this service that, hey, we're getting this right. Just give us some time to invest and fix this.
And Ms. Temple has been wonderful during this time with the IT modernization and working with Mr. Barton with copyright. And it includes working on the backlog. This year's request is 15 more copyright examiners. That's a part of a backlog. This goes with the 15 that were in last year's request, so there are about 13. You're getting to the level that copyright had before. So these are the people who are determining, is this eligible for copyright? Also, the IT modernization. We're past stabilizing and optimizing what we have to developing a new system similar to what people are used to with tax filing automatically. A lot of the backlog has to do with the process that's not automated like people are expecting in other parts of life, where it stops you and makes you go back. If it's a paper-based system, that's difficult. It takes time. So using technology to really modernize, and also the people that can help with the backlogs. I mentioned the 25% that reduction in the registration, the recordation. Think of car transfer of title. That's entirely paper-based and manual. So IT modernization is going to really help with that. So we're very confident that it's
And as
on the
that
way.
backlog is resolved, do you see, a typical turnaround time? Is there a way to estimate what that might become?
Ms. Temple might be able to give you what we hope. We are working on the development of the system, and Aaron, do you want to just estimate? And this is as we move forward with the new system, going totally.
Obviously, we wouldn't actually be able to give you the specific time now. We would expect, though, that the time would be reduced significantly once we actually have a truly modernized system. It would go from the 7 to 9 months, for example, that we have for online claims that don't have correspondence, to much less. We would.
What does that look like? I know you can't say, look, we can put a guarantee in front of this committee that if we'll have it done in 10 days, but what would you think would be an appropriate turnaround time that would be, the right speed if you could get there?
Well, I would say it would have to vary because it's going to depend on the complexity of the particular claim that we get into the office. And in terms of how long it actually takes us to fully process the claim, that is actually also really largely affected by the quality of the application that we get in, if we have to correspond with the user who is actually filling the claim. But
I understand, because 7 to 9 months, as you can estimate now, with all those factors included.
Right.
We're investing in all of this. We're adding personnel, we're adding dollars. And if your response is, well, it still may be 7 to 9 months, it could be less, we can't give you, where do you think we can get to?
Yeah, I would be reluctant to give you a specific, we'll be able to do it in 24 hours, because then you'll hold us to it.
Right, I understand.
But I would
That's
say.
why I'm asking the question.
But I would say that we do expect a significant reduction from the 7 to 9 months. That's not something that we think is beneficial to the overall copyright system as a whole. And so, without saying a specific time that you would hold me to, I would expect that there will be a very significant reduction from that 7 months to something much less. And if we can get it down to weeks or hours, of course, we will always be aiming
We're
for
always
that.
going to be aiming to make it more efficient and quicker, with all while doing our jobs and protecting artists, because that's part of the whole purpose. You want to make sure they're not
Right.
stealing someone else's work. in the
Right, and we wanna
process,
make
right?
sure
It's
that the-
about protecting the artist.
The record itself is
Right.
accurate that would be able to facilitate licensing in the system. So we don't want to do it so quickly that
Right.
we are actually, causing.
Speed is not the only
problems.
factor here. We understand
Right.
that.
And patents are different from copyrights in terms
Mm-hmm.
of how they can be automated in that sense too. And that's been something that we're really looking at. We're learning from the patent experience, but also
Okay.
taking in the unique.
Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Ryan? Good? Everybody good? All right. Well, Dr. Hayden, thank you, and Mr. Sweeney, and everyone who works hard for the library. Thanks for attending today, and thanks. We'll look forward to a new visitors experience
Yes.
and improved technology with the Copyright Office and so many other things you're doing to strengthen and preserve the great treasure that is the Library of Congress.
Well, thank you for your support.
Yeah,
This
thanks for your
means
good
a lot.
work. All right, with that committee, we're going to recess for a minute in order to bring on our next hearing, which is with the House of Representatives leadership.